The ePay Stub for Canadian Payroll module is a powerful companion product for Microsoft Dynamics GP that allows you to effortlessly email employee pay stubs, T4s, T4As, and R1s from Microsoft Dynamics GP. The ePay Stub for Canadian Payroll is simple for payroll staff to use, and it's appreciated by employees, offering functionalities such as instant and secure delivery of pay stubs, T4s, T4As, and R1s to employees regardless of their location. Choose from either PDF or HTML delivery format. PDF using Adobe Acrobat Writer is most often used. The ability to send in batches or individually. Save time and money by eliminating the need to print, fold, and stuff pay stubs into envelopes and reducing postage requirements. Take steps towards a greener, paperless office environment. Let's see how it works. Today's demonstration is going to focus on the setup and use of the ePay Stub module for Dynamics GP. The first thing we want to do is go to the setup window. We go to Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, ePay Stub, and Main Setup. The setup window is broken into 3 sections. The first section is asking if we'd like to enable password protection on the PDFs. You define which documents you want to put the password protection on, and then define how the password is set up. By default, it's the first 3 characters of the last name of the employee and the last 3 digits of their social insurance number together. So the password of an employee with the last name of Smith and a social insurance number of 123456789, his password would be SMI in lowercase and 789. You can actually increase the security on these passwords if you'd like by increasing the number of characters for the last name or the number of digits for the social insurance number. Just be aware that if for some reason the number of characters in the employee last name is less than the number of characters that you've defined in your list, that the first name of the employee will then be looked to for the balance of the characters. For the pay stub file setup, what's the file name setup? You have the option of doing it by employee ID, first name, last name, or last name, first name. If you choose employee ID, the add employee ID option will not be available. In our case, we've chosen last name, first name, and we've chosen to add the batch ID to our file. So our sample file name is John Smith with his batch ID and the file type of PDF. In the defaults window, you are assigning the defaults for emailing of the document. So the generated email and printing option here is you can print the pay stub when the email is not sent. This option is good to set if there's any errors with Exchange as the email goes out. Invalid email address would be checked by our verify stage as we print the pay stubs, but we can also make sure that if for some reason the receiving exchange didn't get it, or any other reason that the email doesn't get sent, that a pay stub gets printed. Print the pay stub with the email, so do both at the same time, or don't print the pay stub with the email. In our case, we're not printing the pay stub with the email, we're just saving the actual pay stub in a file. We can have the report destination window open when we generate our PDFs if we'd like to override the default path that we've chosen here. With the default path, you want to save it to a local drive first, just to make sure that once everything is confirmed, you can move it to a more secure site on the server where your payroll records are stored. The subject line of the email, and then the body of the email. What would you like the body to say? Sometimes people will remind what the password format is, and you could include the employee ID or the batch ID in your subject line also. You follow that same procedure to do the T4 email and any other document you may have set up. Click OK to save your changes. And the next thing we'll need to do is set up the employee email addresses. So we'll go to Cards, Canadian Payroll, Employee. pick an employee who we're going to be sending emails to, and under additional and email address, you enter in the appropriate email address for that employee and email pay stub and email T4. It's probably important to note here that the Canadian Revenue Agency requires that you have written consent from an employee to allow their pay stubs to be emailed, whether that's a physical piece of paper or an email electronic documentation of some kind, but you must have that permission before you start emailing their documents. If you ever want to have an employee off the email list, you simply just remove the email address and these options, and they're no longer going to get emails attached to their pay stub. The last step in the whole process is to actually email our pay slips. So assuming that we've already got our Canadian payroll batch created, we can go into HR and payroll, into reports, transactions, and go to the check reports. When in the check reports window, we go to additional and email pay slips. So now our email pay slips window opens up. We can choose the advice slip options, either summary or detail. By default, Dynamics GP default reports are used for the advice. They're standard texty looking documents, so if you want something fancier, we can create modified reports. You can change your file path, your subject line, and the message body as required. Of course, everything defaults based on what we had set up earlier. We can change the attachment option and our email printing options. In the employee selection window, it's nice to note that you can change or add email details for an employee by clicking on the zoom options with a double click. And in our zoom options now, we can say, are we going to be able to do employee email maintenance or update the employee card? So we'll set it to email maintenance, and we can go add an email address for Lynn. So we can double click here. Her employee ID and name, of course, is defaulted. We can set into her email address. And we can also say we want to email her pay stub or email her T4. Save it, close it, and redisplay, and then the email address pops in and it says that emailing is now enabled. You can actually sort the columns by email address, by employee name, by employee ID, whichever is more appropriate for what you're doing. And you can also say, I want to select or deselect specific employees for emailing just by simply clicking in the checkbox or double clicking the different options. Once you're satisfied with your selections, you can then click on Generate PDFs to generate those PDFs for those employees. It takes a second or two to do that. Comes up to the screen to tell you which PDFs I generated. So I generated one for Andrew and one for Garrett. The next step then is to say verify, so that I can verify my email information and who I'm actually sending slips to. So again, for Andrew and Garrett and their check amount. Once I'm happy with that and the selection, I can then actually email the documents. So you notice that until I actually did the verify step, the email documents didn't come up. Now I've emailed the documents and it says yes, it's been emailed, and yes, it's successful, and it also says this is where the PDF document or copy of that pay stub is saved. So if we wanted to see a copy of that PDF pay stub, we can just go to Andrew's, and of course it asks us for a password as we assigned in our setup earlier. So we'll put in the password, say okay, and then that is what this pay stub would look like. So from here, it's, like I said, just a PDF, so you can just save it on the server in a more secure location. And that's pretty much it. ePayStub for Canadian payroll is a huge time saver. Not only is it simple for payroll staff to use, it's appreciated by employees. During today's webinar, we've introduced you to the features and benefits of using ePayStub, as well as demonstrating just how easy it is to set up and use.